Welcome to the Finance Truths. The world does not run on compassion, fairness, or hollow promises of eternal economic stability. It runs on the violent breath of a monster called the cycle. While the crowd is drunk on the illusion of endless growth, while cheap money floods every corner of life like a sweet poison, that is when the scythe in the shadows begins to sharpen, silently and patiently. There is a brutal truth the mainstream media works hard to conceal. Money never disappears in a crisis. It only migrates. It moves from the pockets of the panicked to the hands of the patient, from those who see assets as lifeless numbers to those who understand that assets are absolute power, the power to shape the world. A crisis is never the end of growth. It is a powerful comma, separating an old class of wealth clinging to outdated glory from a new class of wealth rising quietly from the ashes. History does not remember the fearful. It engraves the names of those who recognized opportunity when blood was flooding the markets. And today's podcast may serve as a strategic map, guiding you out of the role of a sheep and into the ranks of those who lead the herd. Welcome to Hidden Self, a place for truths society does not want you to know. Here, we strip the wool from the sheep, expose the brutal scripts of the elite, and reveal how to survive and win inside their game. The global financial system is a perfectly engineered machine designed to shear the flock on a recurring schedule, a ruthless but calculated filter. Every cycle begins with seduction. Central banks slash interest rates to extreme lows. Money is printed without restraint and injected into the system under the banner of economic stimulus. This is when the herd, ordinary workers and small investors are fattened. When money is easy, reason collapses under greed. People borrow to amplify profits, to buy homes, cars, and speculative assets. Euphoria spreads. Everyone believes they are a genius, when in reality, they are only being prepared for slaughter. Then comes tightening. The scythe emerges from the darkness. Debt reaches its limit. Asset prices become absurd. The machine reverses. Central banks suddenly raise rates to fight inflation. Cheap money vanishes. Borrowing becomes suffocatingly expensive. Those standing atop mountains of debt begin to choke. This is when the shepherd pulls the net, turning dreams of quick wealth into nightmares of insolvency. Then comes asset seizure and consolidation, the great migration of power. As panic spreads like a virus, asset prices collapse. Crushed by debt and fear, the masses dump their most valuable assets at fire sale prices just to survive. And that is when silent capital steps in. Cash-rich elites and rising financial powers who waited patiently enter the field. They don't just buy assets, they buy the future. They acquire supply chains, infrastructure, and economic lifelines at laughable discounts. A new order is established, and those who never understood the rules will spend their lives paying rent to those who wrote them. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. The great crises of the past were not accidents. They were calculated shockwaves meant to restructure global power. 1929, the Great Depression. The roaring 1920s were an age of madness. Stocks were seen as a shortcut to paradise. Then came Black Tuesday. The bubble burst.
thousands of banks collapsed. While millions stood in breadlines, financial dynasties like Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan consolidated empires, buying oil, railroads, and dying banks. The Depression destroyed the rising middle class, but concentrated unprecedented financial power into the hands of a few. 1997, the Asian financial crisis, a transnational wealth extraction. It began with Thailand's currency and swept through Southeast Asia. Currencies collapsed, reserves evaporated, nations drowned in debt. Behind the scenes, financial instruments and pressure from institutions like the IMF enabled massive restructuring. Western capital entered under the label of rescue, but seized banks, infrastructure, and natural resources. A new generation of Asian elites rose, not by resisting the tide, but by aligning with it. 2008, the greatest debt transfer in history. Subprime mortgages collapsed, Lehman Brothers fell, the global system stood at the edge of annihilation. People lost homes and jobs, but look closely, who truly benefited? Banks deemed too big to fail were rescued with taxpayer money. After 2008, giants like BlackRock and Vanguard rose with unprecedented power, buying millions of foreclosed homes and turning an entire generation into permanent renters. Debt became the ultimate tool of control. So how do you know when the scythe has finished its cut and dawn is approaching? Watch the signals. First, the inverted yield curve. Its normalization after inversion signals that the system has extracted enough blood and a new liquidity cycle is being prepared. Second, central bank pivots. When rate hikes stop and easing is hinted at, the reset begins, while the crowd remains trapped in pessimism. Third, extreme fear. When despair dominates headlines and the last investors capitulate, that is the market bottom. As Warren Buffett said, be greedy when others are fearful. Fourth, legal and policy-driven consolidation. When laws quietly enable mergers and concentration of financial power, the end game is near. The mindset of the new wealthy is forged in crisis. They focus on position, not survival. They understand that when the tide retreats, only certain islands remain exposed. They know crisis filters illusion from reality. They practice discipline, restraint, and emotional neutrality. They upgrade their intelligence while others panic. They preserve liquidity. They control debt. They study the rules instead of believing narratives. They adapt faster than the system can punish them. This era is not ruled by force, but by debt and legal complexity. The ultimate goal is simple: convert ownership into permanent rent and make people lease their own lives. You cannot stop the tide, but you can learn to ride the wave. Crisis does not come to destroy you, it comes to select. The new wealthy of the next decade are being formed right now through silent preparation, iron discipline, and unshakable self-mastery. When the sun rises again, it will only illuminate those already standing on the mountain. The question is simple: where will you be when that day arrives?